Even though Donald Trump put 25% tariffs on Canada and delayed it, the damage had already been done. Instead of backing down, Justin Trudeau hit back, announcing 25% tariffs in retaliation. However, what's disastrous for the US is what he said next. He declared that Canadian companies would find alternatives. Now, in the energy sector, success has already been achieved. Until now, Canada exported about 45% of its gas to the United States, delivering nearly 3 trillion cubic feet of gas each year. But this has come to an end as Trump hinted at imposing 10% tariffs on energy from Canada. Instead of begging not to do it, Canada has decided to replace the US entirely. So what massive energy deal has been made with Japan that can totally replace the US for Canadian gas export? In this video, let's know about the whole story. Canada's stunning move to replace the United States with Japan as its primary gas export destination is not just an economic shift. It's a direct challenge to US energy dominance, sending shockwaves through the American energy sector. This is a decision that the US never saw coming, and now Washington is scrambling to assess the fallout. For decades, the US has relied on Canadian crude and natural gas to fuel its economy. But with tensions rising over tariffs and an increasingly unpredictable trade relationship, Canada has done what no one thought possible. It broke free from US dependence and handed its resources to Japan. This is not just a business deal. This is a geopolitical earthquake, and the consequences will be brutal for the US economy. At the heart of this crisis is Donald Trump's reckless tariff policies, which have now backfired in the worst way imaginable. By threatening to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian exports, Trump created a climate of extreme uncertainty, leaving Canada with no choice but to seek new, more reliable buyers. Even though these tariffs were later suspended temporarily, the damage was already done. Canada realized that it could no longer trust the US as a stable trading partner, so it cut a historic energy deal with Japan. This shift marks a radical transformation in North America's energy balance. For decades, Canada pumped massive amounts of oil and gas into the US, fueling American refineries and keeping domestic energy prices stable. But now that flow is being redirected to Asia, leaving a massive hole in the US energy supply. That's because every year Canada used to export about 45% of its gas and 97% of its crude oil to the United States. In other words, it was completely dependent on American buyers, and this relation of dependency goes both ways. The American energy sector is heavily dependent on Canadian energy because of the infrastructure development based on a steady energy supply from Canada. But now the US energy sector is seeing Canada go far away, and the shockwaves from this decision will be felt in every corner of the American economy, from rising gas prices to increased costs for industrial production. At first glance, it seemed China would be the primary beneficiary of Canada's decision to break away from the US. That's because, for years, Beijing has been aggressively seeking to secure energy deals with Canada, hoping to reduce its dependence on Middle Eastern oil and strengthen its grip on global energy markets. But in a move that has left China confused, Canada chose Japan instead, cutting Beijing out of the deal entirely. That's because Japan offered something that China could not: absolute stability. Unlike China, which has a long history of weaponizing trade deals and imposing restrictive conditions on its suppliers, Japan presented itself as a reliable, long-term partner. The Japanese government has been pushing aggressively to replace coal with LNG, and Canada's natural gas is the perfect solution. Japan's Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Yuya Hasegawa, personally met with Canadian officials to seal the deal, ensuring that Japan would be the exclusive buyer of Canada's newest LNG shipments. China, on the other hand, has been left scrambling. Beijing was counting on securing a long-term supply of Canadian energy, especially with the growing US-China tensions threatening its other import routes. But now, With Canada effectively shutting the door on Chinese imports, China is faced with a serious supply problem, forcing it to look elsewhere for alternatives. However, no one will be hurt more than the United States, as it will face one of the most severe energy crises in modern history. Following Canada's unexpected decision to divert its oil and liquefied natural gas exports to Japan, the immediate impact of Canada's pivot toward Japan will be felt at the gas pump and in household energy bills. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. U.S. refiners, especially those in the Midwest, have long depended on cheap, heavy crude oil from Canada's oil sands. Unlike the lighter crude produced in Texas or the Middle East, Canadian crude is uniquely suited for refining into diesel, jet fuel, and other high-demand petroleum products. Now, with Canada diverting its supply to Asia, U.S. refineries will be left scrambling for alternative sources. The problem is that no viable alternative exists without enormous cost increases. Importing crude from Venezuela means dealing with high shipping costs and volatile diplomatic relations. Relying more on Middle Eastern oil increases exposure to geopolitical instability, where any conflict in the Persian Gulf could send prices skyrocketing overnight. The result will be a surge in gasoline prices, increased heating costs for American households, and rising inflation across multiple industries. What was once an energy advantage for the U.S. is now becoming an economic liability, yet things won't stop there. The United States will lose control over global energy markets because its own oil and gas won't be enough to dictate and control prices. The U.S. has spent decades establishing itself as a dominant force in global energy trade, using Canadian resources as a strategic buffer to manipulate oil prices and maintain leverage over international supply chains. But with Canada aligning itself with Japan and potentially other Asian markets, Washington's grip on global energy is slipping. The balance of power is shifting, and this is a direct blow to America's influence over the global oil and LNG trade. This isn't just an economic issue, it's a geopolitical disaster. The U.S. has long used its North American energy monopoly as a tool to pressure allies and adversaries alike. But now, Canada's oil and gas are going elsewhere, leaving Washington with fewer bargaining chips in international diplomacy. Worse still, this move weakens America's ability to dictate oil prices, making it harder to counter OPEC, Russia, and other major oil-producing nations that are eager to challenge U.S. dominance. Another brutal consequence of Canada's shift is the crippling impact on American LNG exports. The U.S. has spent the past decade aggressively expanding its LNG infrastructure, hoping to position itself as the leading supplier of natural gas to Asia. A key part of this strategy was securing Japan as a major buyer of American LNG. In fact, former President Donald Trump and his administration had been pushing hard to convince Japan to back a $44 billion LNG project in Alaska, which would have cemented American dominance over LNG exports to the Pacific. But now, Canada's move has completely undermined this plan. Instead of buying U.S. LNG, Japan has chosen Canadian gas instead, leaving the Alaska project in serious jeopardy. Without Japan's support, the project could collapse entirely, wasting billions of dollars in investments and shattering America's hopes of securing long-term LNG dominance in Asia. This shift also means that other Asian nations may start looking to Canada instead of the U.S. for future energy deals. If Canada proves to be a cheaper, more stable, and less politically risky supplier, Washington could soon find itself losing multiple markets, further eroding its position as a global energy leader. However, this is just the beginning. Canada has now fully embraced the idea of energy independence, and experts predict that more aggressive moves are coming. With the Trans Mountain expansion complete, Canada is now tripling its oil export capacity to Asia. And there are already plans for 4 or 5 additional LNG export projects that will cement Canada's role as a global energy powerhouse. The key advantage that Canada holds over the US is geography. The shipping route from Alberta to Japan is significantly shorter than from the US Gulf Coast, cutting transportation costs and making Canadian LNG far more attractive to Asian buyers. Rebecca Schultz, Alberta's Minister of Environment and Protected Areas, has made it clear that Japan is now Canada's top priority, signaling that this is not just a temporary shift, it's a permanent realignment. Not only that, but Japan will be the first in many Canadian gas buyers' queue, allowing Canada to de-risk its energy sector from the United States. Now, Trump is confronting the hard reality. The US thought it could bully Canada into submission with tariff threats. But instead it pushed its closest ally into the arms of Asia. Now, the consequences are spiraling out of control. America is losing its grip on global energy markets, Canada is forging a new path without Washington, and Japan is cementing its future as an energy leader in Asia. This is a turning point that will reshape the global economy for years to come, and the US was completely unprepared for it. What do you think? Will Canada be able to replace the US by exporting oil and gas to Japan, China, and other energy consumers? Or do you feel the US would never put tariffs on Canadian oil and gas to ensure it gets a steady supply of energy? In the comments section right below, share your thoughts on the fact that Canada has crude oil and gas which bring leverage to do whatever it wants, much like how Saudi Arabia does. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order and current affairs, things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.